Welcome to another episode of What the Fuck Do You Do Season 3. We got a really special guest here. She's one of my close friends here in New York. She is a leadership development manager here at a large tech company in New York. Callan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shrey.
Well, can you explain to us what the fuck leadership development is?
Yeah, it's really vague.
I have no idea.
Oh God. So it's funny. You sent me the PDF of the questions that you were going to ask me, and I'm like, how am I going to describe this? And I haven't really figured it out yet.
Okay.
So I'm going to just throw a few things out here and say, here are a few things that I do, comma in between. Yeah, there we go. We know this all.
That's my clip.
That's your clip.
Just do.
Okay, so leadership development is underneath the umbrella of learning and development, right? So when you think about like training, facilitation, so people that get up, coaching, that is another piece of leadership development. Essentially research. So a lot of what I do with my company is understanding what do good leaders do, right? How do they act? What are the good behaviors that they exhibit with their teams? When I'm feeling a little bit cheeky, I say I try and help leaders not act like dicks. But I'm not assuming that like leaders are dicks, but sometimes they can come across it. Like everyone has had a leader where you've been like, wow, that was a dick move.
I would kind of assume all leaders are dicks, unless otherwise I've seen it.
You've seen it?
Most of the time that's what I'd assume to be true.
Oh.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
I just think they're very direct and sometimes bossy and can be sometimes mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is why I have a job. What do you guys think? Okay. Travis, Justin, what do we think?
I think there are good leaders and there are bad leaders, and I have opinions on what makes one or the other. But I'm not paid to do that.
I think
That's a very political answer.
That was.
that was weak. I think most leaders are sociopaths.
There we go. Yeah.
Are leaders sociopaths or are the companies sociopaths?
I think most leaders of Fortune 500 companies and most politicians throughout history are certifiable sociopaths.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that's what most of leadership training is modeled off of. And therefore, a lot of people read HBR articles from the 80s about how to run a streamlined organization, and then they come off like dicks. So that's where I'm coming in from.
I love it. That's spicy. That's the spices everyone's been asking for. I love it. This is now a debate. All these things are valid, right? Like every company has great leaders. Every company has leaders that could be better. And like that's what our team is here to do, is to kind of figure out how do we create a consistent expectation that the company has to hold leaders to, right? Like how can we make sure that they are either developing their teams, and if they're not going to that standard, how can we tell them to hit the road?
Wait, okay. You actually just brought up something I really haven't thought of, but like how do you measure leadership? Like how do you quantify, besides like profits, employee retention? I don't know. Those are what come to mind for me.
Wow, we're going there. You just hit like the crux of like what keeps every leadership development person awake at night.
Or what you get paid the big bucks for. Yeah.
I mean, they could be bigger. This is the big point there. So it's really hard to measure behavior. Right, and I'm so sorry if everyone's falling asleep here, but it is quite interesting. Okay, so if you think about like how do you measure leadership behavior? How do you measure effective teams? How do you measure creating psychological safety where someone can be like, well, exactly what Shrey said, you're being a dick. Not that you'd want to say that in a corporate environment, but like how can you say that, oh my God, we got to edit out dick. That's so bad, I cannot say that.
No, it's in.
You can just bleep it. Really nice person. Yeah, so it's like really hard just in general in the learning space or in culture, because like learning is usually underneath a culture umbrella, which is usually underneath people team. So technically I'm in HR, which is, it's been a hard pill to swallow. But a lot of times it's around like what can we see, what can we actually see in behavior changes, and how does that relate to KPIs? How does that relate to more sales? How does that relate to more tickets, like in product and tech? How does that relate to more tickets being serviced and more features being pushed out? So it's really hard, but that is what we kind of have to do, and that's what a lot of conversations are around.
So what is like the facilitation, the coaching, like what does that look like? Are you putting together presentations for a bunch of leaders in a room? Are you like taking them into a room one by one and like coaching them yourself? What does that look like?
Yeah, all the above, to
Okay.
be completely honest. So I'm a certified coach. My coaching style could be bringing a leader into a room and being like, okay, what do we want to work on today? Or it could be like, hey, I've noticed something that I'd really like to talk about. This kind of showed up, and I noticed the way that your team took it. I noticed the energy in the room really shifted, and people started to shut down. They weren't able to voice their opinions. So did you realize that? Like one of those type of questions. So the idea of like emotional intelligence, self-awareness, which everyone can always get better at, right? Some people really usually have, can naturally have higher emotional intelligence, but you can always get more, right? Depending on like what roles you're in and like what teams and people you're interacting with. Facilitation is really different than coaching. So this could be more like, I'm trying to think, like if you've ever been to like a leadership summit where you're learning something new. So it's like bringing out all the bells and whistles, like what is his name? Tony Robbins?
The
yeah.
infomercials? Or no?
Like
this
you're doing like
motivational
seminars.
speaker.
He just yells
Yeah.
at you with giant hands.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, let's do it. Wait, can I see that again, Justin? Yeah. Sorry, you guys can't see this, but it looked really good. Everyone in New York.
Unless you subscribe on the YouTube.
Yep,
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's cameras right here. Yeah, you guys can see it. You can see it. You can see it. You can see it. So you all just saw my face get super red. Yeah, so I've done this before, and usually I'm interviewing people, so I'm usually behind the camera. So this is the first time I've actually had to talk, and my face has been bright red pretty much this whole time. So hi everyone. Where was I going with this? I don't remember.
Facilitation.
Yeah.
Facilitation. Yeah, so it's about teaching a group of people something new. So it could be like honestly teaching someone how to coach, like the fundamentals of coaching. That's something we've recently done at work where it's new people, leaders who are stepping into role. What happens if someone comes to you with a question? Do you just tell them the answer right away?
Lead a fish to the water.
Yeah.
Teach them how to fish or whatever it is.
Totally. Yeah. I'm like looking straight at you.
I got put on the spot. I'm not running facilitation seminars.
You can lead a horse to the pond. But
That's
you
the
can't
one
make a
I'm
horse
looking
drink.
for. That's the
Yeah,
one.
you can make them drink.
Yeah, but you can teach him how to fish, and a man will be full for the rest of his life.
All right, now we're just saying proverbs.
But I have heard, right, that it's better to help somebody learn how to come to that answer on their own.
Totally. And like a lot of times when people come to you with questions, you're usually giving them an answer that doesn't really solve their problem.
Yeah.
Because people are like, I totally got you. This is the answer. And then you're like, that's not what I was asking. But then you just kind of walk away and you're like, all right, well, that wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
Do leaders ask good questions?
That's a great question.
You're a good
I imagine
leader.
they're like giving orders or they're giving direction a lot of times. So I can imagine like it's hard for them to get out of that space for maybe some of them. Like, where do most leaders struggle? Is it the coaching side or is it the facilitation side?
So leaders don't usually facilitate. There's another kind of avenue here that's around presenting.
Mm-hmm.
So usually what you'll see is leaders needing to present a topic. So bring energy, convey a very compelling message. So think about if there's like layoffs at a company or if there's a ton of change. How do you rally a team behind you to really motivate them and continue to find value in what they're doing, stay at the company, keep retention, and continue like working towards the goal that you want to accomplish? So that's usually what we're trying to get leaders to do. So some people could call that strategic communication, or executive presence is usually what that goes under, of like how can you inspire people and really command an audience by just being there.
Is there a gold standard for leadership? Like, is there an organization or like a company that you're basing a lot of like your teachings or like the curriculum off of?
So at my company, we just completed and conducted a ton of really in-depth research of what does good leadership look like. So we were able to find the people who were the highest performer leaders, also validated not only by KPIs, so like how many people are actually successful in meeting their goals, but also by asking peers, like who are the people that you really look up to, who really create a really inspiring environment that you want to follow. And we asked them, like, what do you do? What do you do? We didn't say, hey, we know that everyone loves you and this is why we're asking you. We were just like, what do you do? And then we asked their managers. We said, hey, what does this person do?
Yeah.
Like why? What is it that they do that makes everyone want to follow them? And then we asked the people below them and we say, what is it that that this person does that makes you want to follow them? So we looked at 360, like what are the characteristics? Then we looked at other companies and said, what does this look like in your company? Exactly to your point, Justin. Like what does this look like in your company, and are we hitting are we hitting the same mark, or are we completely in a different planet? Usually it's around the same things. So the idea of like building an inclusive and psychologically safe environment where everyone feels able to speak up and say their mind. There's a book called Radical Candor. I don't remember who it's on. Yeah, Radical Candor. You guys, yeah.
I've heard of it. I never read it.
Yeah, I haven't read it.
Oh my gosh.
Justin
You
reads
should read
Spider-Man comics.
it. Yes.
I'm opting out of reading. Just in general. I'm
Just
an audiobooks
pictures.
guy.
Audiobooks. Oh, Kindle.
That's a lie. I'm a podcast guy.
Yeah.
I'm a big podcast guy. Weird. That's a good pickup line.
Works only in Brooklyn and Portland.
I love using my ears.
Yeah.
Big listener. Okay, let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
This sounds great, but do leaders want this? Like, especially because I feel like leaders, they're probably seasoned, right? They've kind of put years of experience into growing their career a certain way. Now someone's going to tell them, oh, you need to change the way you do things. Like, so do you find resistance with this?
Well, actually, I'm sitting in a room here full of men, so let me just do a little bit of a temperature check here. Have you all ever stepped into a new role and felt, oh shit, I don't think I was ready for this?
Every
Yes.
single
Yeah,
role.
every day.
Every day.
Wow. I just want this to I don't know if this is helping my piece or not. I'm not exactly sure. Okay.
No, never. I'm super confident all the time.
Yeah. I'm here to kick ass.
All I got to do is show up.
Yeah.
I could have
Like
been a
that?
VP. Yeah. As soon out of college. Yeah. So the answer is yes, they want it because people are usually very scared as they step into any new role, no matter if it's scope difference, no matter if it's getting a new team. Sometimes it takes a while for people to admit it, but you need people to follow you to be a leader. And if as soon as you realize, oh, people aren't following me, I'm not hitting my goals, the first thing they're going to say is, oh my gosh, it's my leadership. What am I doing? Or sometimes they'll look at other things and point fingers, and it's up to our team to step in and be able to consult and say, hey, it's actually not a pointing finger thing. It's you're not communicating your goals to your team. They don't know what their place is in your story. So find a place for them. Or it could also be how can we help bring value to your team? So a lot of times we act as consultants within a learning and development space or within a corporate company.
So it's almost like a partnership in a sense. Like you're working with the leader and you're sort of observing and then trying to help them. And they also are asking you hey, how am I doing? How can I be better? That sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really interesting. I've actually just today, we have a hub in India, and we've just recently been hiring a ton of people in this space, a lot of amazing talent with mostly product and tech, so lots of engineers. And we realized that something was brought to our attention from our CTO, who's a female. She's awesome. She's also from India, and she was saying that there was a bit of a leadership problem with the newly developed managers. And the head of India, which is a man, was saying, I'm not exactly sure what's going on. Not everyone in this large hub of 2,000 people report to me, so I don't know what they're doing, and I'm not exactly sure what the problems are. So we went and we were doing research, and we came up with quite a few interesting research points that we had to present to him. And one of them was around female leadership not feeling like they had male, not subordinates, but male teammates that wanted to follow them because they thought that it was going to stunt their career growth. So it's like sometimes there's also cultural aspects that we have to bring up, and maybe those aren't the things that we are going to solve because we're not part of the culture team, but we can raise them up and say, hey, here's the team that you should go to. So these types of things that leaders are constantly trying to figure out, but maybe are not as close because people don't have that psychological safety to say, hey, like as a female leader, I don't know like if I would feel comfortable going straight to my leader and saying, people don't want to follow me because I'm a woman. Like I can't change that. So like sometimes it helps as being a third party to come in and really lay down the picture and tell the story and then say, here are the best ways to go about it. I think I answered your question. I might have just gone off on a tangent.
In that case, if there are cultural barriers to like garnering that respect as a female leader, like what is the direction for y'all then? Do you coach them on how to do like the day-to-day a little bit better and just ignore that side of it? Or like how do you troubleshoot if there is that cultural barrier there?
Usually more research. Understanding what's the root cause. Is it bias? Is it certain people that are setting these expectations or telling these, like lies, like let's be honest, like telling these lies to people saying like, don't go work for this woman because you're not going to grow as fast. Like who are those people and where is this coming from? So there is a bit of like HR pieces in that, but I think there's another piece of what holistically are we doing to set a culture within certain hubs? So could it be the like IND that or diversity and inclusion sessions that we are making available to people? Are they locally relevant, right? Like in the US, we have very different problems that we're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. So how can we make sure that they are locally relevant to those people? And did we even think about that when we were first creating these? A lot of times we partner with teams like diversity and inclusion to create these types of sessions. So it's really quite a fluid and like amorphic, is that the word? I used that today. I don't know if I used it correctly.
I think that's right, yeah.
Amorphic, yeah. Type space. And like that's one part of it. That's like the stakeholder management. The really fun part of the job is actually the creative side, which is like a ton of brainstorming, working with graphic designers, like creating an experience. And that's the part that I super, super love. The idea of like creating something, whether it be a 2-day session or whether it be just like an e-learning for 30 minutes that makes someone think, wait, that was wild. That was awesome, and I can't believe that. Like, I got to spend 30 minutes doing that, and they think about it randomly and, like, go home and tell their partner, guess what? Like, this was freaking cool. That's what gets me going. The other part is really cool and super impactful, but, like, it's kind of what vehicle do you deliver that in to make it the most memorable?
Well, okay, so I feel like a lot of your job, it's amorphic, is the word you used.
Yeah.
But it's, like, psychology.
Yeah.
Like, how do you sort of get in the mind of a good leader? How do you motivate them? It's like dealing with people. How did you get into this? Did you study psychology in college?
No, I've just always been a big fangirl of learning and development. No, I did Spanish and business double major. That's what I studied.
Okay.
I went to a small private liberal arts school in the middle of Ohio. I'm from Indiana originally, so this was not available, which I have had words and put in the comment box about like what a big part of corporate life this is now, like employee engagement. How do we make people want to come back to the office? How do we support them, like comms? These things just really were not a part of our curriculum. And as soon as I worked in PepsiCo in supply chain management, I was a people leader, and then I moved into a company that I was super passionate about, which was around travel. So after knocking on doors in like Alaskan huts and like they were actually huts, that was in the name of the thing, that is not something that I'm bringing up. And then, or like bulletproof glass in the middle of LA and asking people if they'd like to join the company of the platform the company I work for. Then I was like, you know what, I'd really love to move to the other side and to teach people how to do this. And so after doing that, moved into this area. So I connected with a person the first day because I knew this is what I wanted to do. And for 4 years, I had to network and say like, hey, what are you doing? Like, what are you working on now? Like, what can I see some of the stuff you're doing? Oh, I have some ideas. Like, do you think this would be cool for me to launch for my team? So it was a lot about networking and like mentoring until I finally got the opportunity to jump over.
And you mentioned earlier, like getting certified as a coach. Was that an important part of the process for credibility, for advancement? Like, what sort of extra training do you do besides networking if you're not getting that exposure from school?
Yeah, the coaching certification was a strategic move. I was really interested in it, but I didn't want there to be too close of two people and like the other person to get it because they had another certification that I didn't. So that was strategic. I really loved it though, and it's helped me a lot in like the work that I've done. What I do find for people who are interested in making this move, a lot of teachers, former teachers, and I know it's like really tough, especially in the US right now for teachers. So if you're thinking about like making a move like this, the way that teachers' brains work was really spectacular and really, really awesome because you really care. A lot of teachers really care about the story that they are trying to tell and how it lands with the end user, and that's really what we have to try and do. So whenever I like pitch an idea to my manager, the first thing is like, what do you want the learner to feel? Like, what do you want them to walk away with? And like, that's the way that like I have to train my brain now. So like, even the first thing when Shrey was like, hey, can we like interview you? I'm thinking like, okay, who is the end user? Like, what does this person want to be hearing? What do they want to be feeling as they listen to us talk? And I was like thinking about that as I was listening to a few of your episodes. So teachers are super cool to be able to go into like design roles, into learning and development, into design thinking, which is like a really big pillar in learning and development.
You bring up a good point that teachers may be really good at this, but I'm a bad student. So for your learners, how do you deal with someone who is hesitant to buy in to what you're trying to teach them?
Well, let me ask. You're going to be a little,
I'm down.
What makes learning really uninteresting to you?
I like learning things that I want to learn about, right? A lot of times for me personally, and I know this differs for a lot of people, like if I don't ask for particular training, a lot of times I have a very high barrier to entry if I get put in there. So if there's something I'm passionate about, I love it. I absorb it relatively fast, but if it feels like not my decision, I'm not the best at that.
So it's about timing. So it's like you want to learn what you want to learn when you want to learn it.
I guess like I don't know. For some trainings, I go in not knowing what I'm supposed to get out of this. And I would much, much rather know, hey, if I do this training, I'm going to come out with X, Y, Z skills that I didn't have. And a lot of time, I don't have that going in. It's just like I see it as, hey, here's another meeting, a block on my calendar, which I know is not right. But
yeah.
How do you deal with someone like me who's like maybe doesn't want to be there as much as you want to be there?
That happens all the time. I've had that happen where I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't want to do this. So I feel you. The way that we approach it is like giving people what they want when they want it, right? Because like we're adults, like I don't want to be taught how to give feedback if I don't have a team to give feedback to. Like that's really the most irrelevant thing I've ever seen. And we have a really bad, like just as like probably corporate cultures, we have a really bad habit of doing that, of like using vehicles, like essential security training and being like, oh, let's just like tack on a few other little things. And then all of a sudden it becomes like this 90-day massive, awful thing that you have to get done. So what we really try to do is like give the power back. It's like kind of a sales technique, is like give the power back to the learners, is like, hey, it's here if you want to do it, right? And it's open, and this is what, like, it's super exciting, and this is what you'll get from it, and this is how you can apply it, and this is how it actually applies to your goals. Like if you want to be a people leader, like that's the simulator that we're kind of starting to build. It's super sexy, and you should really want to try it. But if you don't want to try it, it's fine.
Is there a difference between millennial leaders, Gen Z leaders, and like
boomers?
Yeah, whatever. Gen X boomers.
So there is research that shows like what type of content those different types of generations like to consume. Now,
books versus TikToks.
So
top 5 things.
Yeah. But like seriously, like we have literally tried to like reformat everything that we've done into like podcast form, where it's like we will only put videos out that are less than 3 minutes. Like we were just filming someone, and we had like our media crew there, and we're like 3 minutes only. Nope, that's it. And if you see any of our training, look at it. nothing more than 3 minutes.
And you have like Subway Surfers playing underneath the video.
Seriously.
For the Gen Z.
Like 100%. We've also, like, what else have we done to like really tailor this idea of like asynchronous is what we call it. So like you have self-led stuff and then you have in-person stuff. You have stuff that is when you need it and the answer that you need right there, instead of having to go through like 12 modules to find it. But you can just be like, okay, I need the answer and it's right there. Awesome.
Like a quick dopamine hit. Like
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Like oh yeah, I got it. And then you just move it. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so are you familiar with like the Peter Principle?
No, tell me.
Okay, it's basically the idea that one of the reasons people hate corporate America and generally their managers is that people just get promoted to the level of inadequacy that they meet. So you just keep getting promoted till a point where you're ineffective at your job. Or like, we've talked about this on the show before, like you can be a great salesperson and usually that's rewarded with a job in management, but it doesn't translate, those skills don't translate. And so you've talked about, you can train leadership skills. Like I've definitely heard that, oh, you have to be an innate leader. You can't like learn this. It's an art and stuff. Like, do you think people are bad managers because it's hard to become a leader, or trainings are bad, or both? Why are so many managers bad?
Why are they dicks?
I so love that you asked this question, and I firmly believe this. As a person, I've said this before. I firmly believed it, and I was like, this is a thought. And I've heard other people say this. I've heard you say this. And I'm going to hear you guys say it too. Yeah, corporate companies really love to promote top performers, not the best future leaders. And that is so easy to slip into because people don't know how to, like companies don't know how to reward top performance, because a lot of times companies have not built out IC, so individual contributor development tracks. So like this would be another pillar underneath an HR team, which is called talent, which looks at bringing people into the company. And then once we have them, what are the things that we are putting in place to mark their performance, which it has to be unbiased. It has to be fairly taking everything into consideration. Like it's a really, really hard equation to fit. And like a lot of companies are consistently changing that to make sure that everyone is accounted for. But what we are trying to do now in learning is figure out how do we put in, once again, these impactful experiences for aspiring leaders is the first one we're looking at. So people who are individual contributors, think maybe like 3 to 5 years into role that could be ready to take that step. And they're thinking, like their manager said, so like, you ready? Like, what's the next step? Like, do you want to lead people? And they're like, I don't know. Like, I barely see you in more than my one-on-one every week. Like, I don't know what you do. So how do I know if I want to do this? So being able to build a simulator around what exactly does that look like? Do I like it? What do I want in my next role? So that's where the coaching piece comes in, being asked those really pivotal questions that maybe you've been thinking about in your head, but you've never had someone directly say, what is important to you that you have in your next role? What is it important to you that you don't have in your next role? Like, do you want more responsibility, or do you want to be that person that's developing other people? So having those like important points in career moments that help pull people along. And I think that answers your training question.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you 5 words.
Oh, no.
What makes a good leader? Describe it 5 words. 5 adjectives.
5
Adjectives.
Or 5 words. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Like every time I think of a word, I'm like, oh, well, I disagree with that. I'm having this
only
like
have
fight in my
5.
head. I know. I'd say like inclusive, right? I would say developmental, like someone that helps like develop his people. Accountable, charismatic, which this is the asterisk. You don't have to be outgoing. You don't have to be loud. You can be your own charismatic self, but you got to be like authentic. Charismatic is what that means in my definition. and then I don't know exactly what the word is, but the idea of like being able to have tough conversations, even like have conversations even if they're tough, for the good of the team. And that's something that a lot of leaders somehow are able to skirt up until the very top of like the pinnacle of their career. And instead they will just wait until the person behind them comes for like a underperformer, and wait until like there's a reorg and then try and push them out. So I think that is super important. And maybe that's more from what I would like to see in a leader. But yeah, what we've heard a lot within research is like around those areas. What do you guys think though? I'm so done talking. What do you guys think?
I took a test. I took a very long test to gauge my leadership skills and deficits, and it was actually really fascinating. So I've been a leadership coach at work, at Work Sponsors, which is awesome because my team went from like me to 6 people in like a year, so I needed some help. And basically they had me answer, I think it was about 120 questions about myself, and then 10 kind of shorter, longer answer questions. And then also my family had to fill it out, and my friends had to fill it out, and my direct report, and my manager, and a few coworkers.
It's a 360.
It's a 360. It was like called the Leadership Profile Circle or something
Love
like
it.
that. And it was actually really informative because then they matched up basically in all of these different connected areas, where your strengths and weaknesses were as a leader from all these different areas, and then had some qualitative feedback to back it up. And so I was strong in a lot of areas, which made me feel happy, but I sucked at balance, and I think I sucked at accountability and authentic leadership were like 3 of my deficit areas. And so then we worked on like a plan to actually tackle those. And so it's actually really helpful to translate maybe like feelings of inadequacy or imposter syndrome that you have into something more practical that's like, oh, balance. Like I need to literally work less, and then people that work with me will be happier. So it was cool.
That's awesome. Did the coach tell you not to say you suck at? And say,
Yes.
I'm getting better at.
So
I'm
many-
working on.
So many. Honestly, it was like all about language for the most part. She's an amazing coach. Shout out Bhavana Learning Group. But yeah, it's been really helpful to reframe a lot of the language of the workplace. It's
That's
actually really
awesome.
cool.
That's cool that they have that as a resource.
Yeah.
Trav, did you always know you wanted to be a leader?
I don't think so. I think I became more comfortable leading things because I was scared of people like leaving me behind from a very psychological standpoint. Like in friend groups, I wanted to be the planner or the host because then people were forced to hang out with me. So I've unpacked a lot with my leadership coach. But I think I've been a leader a few times, either in like organizations I started or just like through joining small organizations. So it feels like it feels kind of more natural at this point to like run projects or try to lead stuff. But I don't think I ever saw myself like doing that originally. Yeah.
I'm curious, when did it change?
When did like feeling like a leader change?
Maybe not feeling like, but like when were you like, okay, I would give leadership a go.
Yeah, I think it was when I first had a team. Like I hired a team, I set up coaching plans, I set up like career development, we navigated like conflicts. And then it was like, oh, I actually enjoy managing people, or I enjoy kind of trying to lead a team culture and make it cohesive. And that's honestly becoming more fascinating to me than individual contributing work that I've been doing in the past. So moving more into that team lead space is actually pretty exciting.
That's awesome.
Are there different archetypes for leaders?
What do you mean?
Like I think about personality tests that I've taken, like classic one, like Myers-Briggs, like you're an ENTJ or INFP, whatever. Like, are there buckets, or like, I don't want to use the word stereotypes, but like, are there like
Ravenclaw,
leadership?
Hufflepuff,
yeah,
Slytherin.
yeah. What houses do leaders fall into?
All of them. And I think that's the big misconception. Yeah. Like people usually think that leaders, are usually more masculine, like have more masculine traits, like are confident, are more assertive, are more analytical, like are better at math, are better at science. And so there's a lot of different tests. Like Hogan is a really large, really famous one that is for specifically executive leadership. And we, I've had experience working with that, and it's really, really important that leadership development teams do not give that to the company and say, this is an indicator of who will be the best leader or who will be the best CEO, because it really all depends on like the team dynamic. What about you guys with your leaders? Like, have you noticed a good technicolor of types of leaders or what?
Yeah, I've predominantly seen mostly the super analytical, very confident, outgoing, will speak out at meetings all the time, that sort of thing. Very kind of, for like a better word, maybe like boisterous. But I haven't necessarily seen the antithesis of that.
Like a cool, calm.
And I'm not saying like I've seen leaders who are great leaders and have those qualities, and I've seen leaders who are bad leaders and have those qualities. Like they're loud and they're dicks. And some are loud because they stand up for their team, that kind of thing.
Okay, what about you, Justin? And then I have another follow-up.
I've had really, really good leaders and really bad leaders. I think the good leaders that I've had, it wasn't that they were amazing coaches or they made me personally feel like supported. It was, or not that, like, it wasn't they were great coaches. The best leaders that I've had removed barriers for me as quickly as possible. Like, so I'm on the sales side. I'm pretty autonomous because I've been doing it forever. And for me as a leader, like, I don't need someone to like personally just like sit down and like coach me through something or like just like make like commiserate with me. Like, I need you to tactically help me push this through legal or push this through ops or just like help me do my job better. And that's what I love out of a leader. The bad leaders that I've had were always managing up. They were always they always had directives from their more senior leaders, and they were more focused, or they put too much of an emphasis on, you give me this information so I can send it up the chain, instead of how can I help you? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. I think a few things come up for me, which is really interesting. And it's like the fundamental lesson of becoming a new people leader is, what's the difference between being a new people leader, like being an IC, and being a people leader? And that is still something that has to constantly be reinformed and like re-established in someone's head. And it sounds like for that people leader, it was really hard for them to just like pay attention to their team and not continuously talk on like their success and work on what they're doing.
Right. Like, even though I know that that's what you get paid to do, right?
Yeah.
To manage this team, to manage up, and to like help forecast amazing results. I feel like there's a good way of doing that, and there's a bad way of doing that. The good way is making your people feel supported, so it makes your life easier as you communicate out. Like, that's what I always thought.
There's a model that we also teach called flexing your leadership, and it's teaching people how to like run a diagnostic on their team, to say like, where's my team at? Who is in my team, and what level of experience and expertise does each individual person on my team have? And so when you were talking, I was like, okay, like Justin has a ton of experience. He is someone that probably just needs blockers removed, right? And he needs, I think in the quadrants, so it's like coaching, support, and now I'm like completely blanking. Coaching, support, directing, and then there's one more quadrant that I can't think off the top of my head. But like, you would be in the quadrant where it's like, okay, Justin does not really need me. He just needs me unless like something's going wrong and I need to step in, right? But there's other people, like if there was someone new on your team, on their team, they would need to be giving them a lot more support. Totally. And a lot of times managers don't know how to differentiate at all between the different people on their team. So being able to run that diagnostic and say, oh, I need to be doing something different with this person and this person, is like a light bulb moment.
Yeah, what you're bringing up is like, I don't know, for me, it feels like intention. Like the best leaders that I've worked with are like intentional about their words and their actions, and like, you know, how they're communicating with the team, the feedback that they give, the words that they choose. And then on the flip side, like the worst managers or leaders they just don't care. Like fundamentally, they're not invested in you. They're not acting with purpose. They're just responding or moving things along. So I think to your point, it's like, for somebody to even think about what quadrant of employee or team member you are, there has to be some intention about like wanting to be a good leader or wanting to actually invest in the development for everybody.
100%.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Sheree.
Okay, go. I had a question for you.
I know. Well, but I know that you have a very interesting experience. You were a people leader.
I was.
And if you're open to talking about it,
Okay.
like obviously not in incredible detail, but if you like about your experience being a people leader, which I think is really important and not talked about a ton. Like, what was your experience?
It was good. It was. I mean, it was a lot of work in the sense like if you care about the people who report to you, you have to take some investment into them, and that was hard to kind of shift my brain from like, okay, I'm focused about like what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, to like, okay, I need to be open to like sort of talking with this person and also be open to like what they're going to say to me and sort of be in a positive manner. Like that's takes a lot of energy for me to kind of like do. I think the other thing was stylistically, I have a way of doing things, but making sure that my style is not necessarily something that I expect them to replicate. As long as they're achieving their objective and they do it in their own way, that's great. And I should help enable that. But I feel like in my experience, I've had managers who are like, I don't like the PowerPoint looking like this. And I'm like, but it says the same thing. So like, who cares? And I just was like, I cannot be that type of people leader for this person.
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, it's good. I maybe prefer to be more of an individual contributor, but
But that's the piece. That's like the piece that I
Yeah.
think is so cool that like you tried it on and you were like, okay, yeah, this was cool. And like I found like parts of it I loved and parts of it like,
Yeah.
and I would rather be an individual contributor. And that's cool too.
yeah,
That's super cool.
yeah. I was gonna ask. You were mentioning with the India trip that there's sort of this cultural thing. Educate us for female leaders. What are things they specifically have to navigate or overcome in their development that maybe male counterparts don't have to do?
We have all
Great
the time in the
question.
world.
Yeah. Everyone's like, and leaning in.
And we have a bottle of wine, right?
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, it's in a predominantly male leadership
Yeah.
organizations, right? So,
Yeah. I'm like trying to figure out where I want to start here. Like so I'm like, I'll be fully transparent. I am not a people leader at the moment, right? I have been in the past. The people that we had talked about, who we had interviewed in India and what we had heard, which has been through honestly, like different companies as well. Like if you especially look at product and tech, so a lot of tech companies, not predominantly a female, area, right? People have not only seen not a lot of female engineers, but then when you go even higher up the ladder, you have people who are like, do they know how to code? First of all, like technically, is their technical skill there? Secondly, are they assertive enough to have their voices being heard? Kind of like all of those masculine skills that we had already mentioned before. So already there's like a bias that these women don't have that, right? And then there's even more work to educate to find those people. I think it just kind of reiterating what I said before, like we have to find those people who think that and who are consistently talking in that way and spreading that ideology, because then the more times you hear it, oh my God, this is like all coming full circle, right? Like if you tell yourself like, oh, I suck at this versus like, I'm getting better at this, or like in terms of leadership, like, oh, I've never had a female leader before, but this is going to be great. What an awesome new opportunity versus like, oh my gosh, she's not like Greg, who was freaking amazing. I'm going to lose my job. Like if layoffs come, like she's not going to protect me because I'm a man. Like these types of like stereotypes that will like swirl around in people's heads. We hear a lot about that. We also hear about just, especially in diversity and inclusion conversations, still being cut out of the gender conversation. You know, I feel like in the U.S. we might have, we've hit that pretty well. There's still, of course, a lot of space and a lot of work to be done. Like, yay, we can get credit cards now, but like, not 30 years ago, like 50 years ago, we could not. So that's still wild to think that that was within the area, within time reference. But like, if you look at other countries, are we making the same like mental notes of like what that trajectory is for women, and are we supporting that? And I think the interesting thing is when you have tech companies that are very forward thinking and very forward, and I think you even think of like Salesforce, you think of Facebook, like all of these large companies that are like, we want to have inclusive cultures, but they have companies or they have locations in countries that are not very forward thinking. How do you mesh company culture and country culture? You can't force that upon people. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it is a really, really tough thing. And like, there is a really good book called The Culture Map by, I think, Erin Meyer. I believe that's her name. And it kind of maps out different countries and their cultures on a like graph here, and to explain like high context, low context, low power, high power. So when you start talking to different people, understanding like where you might fall on the map is really important. And it's just, once again, back to that self-awareness. But yeah, I think male leaders also don't even really know that they can verbalize what they're feeling, or sometimes they gaslight themselves. We all gaslight ourselves, but you're like, oh, is this because I'm a woman, or is it because I'm me? Or like, are you feeling this as a woman? Oh, but like, I don't want you to know that like I'm feeling this, because then there's that piece of like competition. So yeah, it really depends. I think there's still a lot of work to be done there.
For female leaders, are there any good like networking organizations or like places to bounce off ideas with other like female leaders?
I'd say the first one is Lean In. So Sheryl Sandberg. Off of her book, there are like communities that have popped up. I'm sure there's a few in New York, and just like all over the world, which are really, really cool. There's also like ATD, which was how I got connected in with Squadron, which is Association for Talent Development Professionals. They're usually within like different industries, but that's a really great way to connect with different leaders and to kind of understand like what are people working on, what are also, you don't have to be a talent development professional, but like also different learning solutions. Like if you don't have a learning org, which is super important. My partner works for a startup and like they have nothing of an HR department. So like his mind is blown when he's like, you what? Yeah, and he's an engineer, so a lot of times engineering orgs don't really, either they don't care or they're not placed in priority in terms of like different skills or diversity and inclusion, which is wrong because they're just as much as part of the company, probably the most important of a tech company. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those are the two I can think of off the top of my head.
I do have one last question from my end. You kind of mentioned something like you work at a big tech company, and obviously there is a lot more infrastructure to have well built out L&D, HR departments as well. If someone is, let's say, outside of tech, starting their business, or just like let's call it in like a non-technical business, and they're starting from the very bottom, if they want to develop good leaders as they scale, where would you start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So is this for the founders or is this for someone who's joining a company?
Let's say for someone who's starting something new, like a founder or, a leader at a smaller company.
Yeah, I would say the big things would be more from like a culture perspective, which is quite interesting. A lot of startups don't seem to put a lot of infrastructure around like mission, vision, and how to align their company to that. And that is like so important for culture of what are we going after and like what are we trying to accomplish? Like yeah. And then I also would say, and this is so important, and it seems like companies position this as a benefit, but it is so important, is to have like a learning and development budget for anyone who joins your company. Like have just some $500, even a year. Like if you don't have really anything, even $500 a year for them to go to a conference or for them to invest in themselves, that shows that you really want them to grow. And then one final shout out is, I can't believe I didn't even say this. A few of my colleagues and I have actually found that there are quite a few women out there that do work in startups and don't have the infrastructure. And so we've created something called Elevate Her World, which is an all-online community, completely free for women to be able to join, and no matter where you are in the world. and get access to different content, different podcasts, create a community, find a mentor. We also hold online sessions and events and stuff. But we know that not every company has the ability to do it, nor do they see the importance. So we wanted to be able to give people access to that. So Elevate Her World is what it's called.
We'll link that in,
I love that.
in all the videos.
I have one more question. Not on that note.
Okay.
Have you had any learning disasters? Like you were talking about taking more risk. I'm imagining like, somebody who's not as motivated and you have this great breakthrough session with them where they're like, I want to take more risks. And then they go and they just like burn the company down on accident. When have you seen coaching
You're all fired.
Yeah, when have you seen coaching go horribly wrong?
I've gone head to head with a few people before in like a 20-person online session during the pandemic when everyone's like super like emotionally charged and they're like, "Rah!" And they're like, I don't think coaching's gonna work. And I'm like, okay. And then it does completely blow up in my face. That has happened a few times and I've had to very quickly pivot and be like, okay, and that is how you don't do coaching. But I usually try to block those out. I mean, totally, like 100%. But like my approach is to not be too professional and be like, well, that's a loss. And here's how not to do it. But like I would say, yeah, I failed multiple times. I'm like a big fan of failure. What have you done? What are you in for?
Oh God, I don't know. That's a tough one. I think I've, maybe not somebody on my team, but I've definitely had conversations where I was like, oh, you should totally go do something else or like think about your values. And then they just like leave the company. I was like, wait, okay, maybe that wasn't really helpful for me.
Yeah.
I was like, I was listening. You needed validation.
That seems like a win, doesn't it?
Probably. Yeah. Long-term win, short-term loss.
I
Yeah.
feel like that's good. Okay, but you guys have to end on a failure.
As a leader?
Yeah, leader failure.
I had someone who was reporting to me where they were not doing a very good job, and I was telling them, and they started crying. And then the next time, I was so sure. I was like, I mean, you were doing such a bad job. I'm not backing down from like what I said before. And I actually talked to my dad, and he was like, you should extend the olive branch. If you care about like the sake of like this ongoing relationship. So you should ask, what feedback do you have for me to start off? Totally changed the whole like dynamic.
Love that.
But it wasn't fun the first meeting.
So
You're a
Mr.
monster.
Panda.
Yeah.
All right.
I've never actually been an official leader. Everyone always says like, hey, I think you'd be a good leader. I don't want to be a leader. I thought I did. I'm much happier being an individual contributor because I think I run into issues when people don't run at my speed. If I was a leader, I would never ask my team to do anything that I wouldn't do, but I think I also have a very high standard for myself. And if it's working with a partner, working with, a team, I think I would struggle a lot and not give people the space to fail. I think I would come in and try to clean it up, which is probably counterintuitive. So I'm happy on the IC side.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an amazing opportunity somewhere, but right now I'm good.
I think you'd be much better than you think as a
Agreed.
leader. I would love to work for
That's
you.
a lot of self-awareness. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
That's anxiety.
Were you expecting when you asked if we're good, like if we're confident in our jobs, for us all to be like, fuck no?
No. Other guys be like, yeah, we got this. But then I'm like,
I'm
no.
a killer.
Yeah,
Rock
crushed it.
star.
Wait, no, but the only other thing I have to say is that probably because you're like, oh, I wouldn't be a good leader. It means you're already a leader. And something that we also have to say is that just because you don't have a people leader role doesn't mean you're not a leader. I think that's, and you are the perfect example. If people are like, you'd be a great leader, it's because you already are one.
I wasn't prepared for that.
I love that.
So much love. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that is a wonderful note to end on. Callan,
the mic.
thank you so much for joining. This was honestly a really great interview, getting to learn about your job, what makes a great leader. But thank you for coming.
Thank you guys for inviting me. This was super fun.